Now, how can I memorize the polyatomic ions? Memorize polyatomic ions. So, this is definitely a great question as well. Just give me a brief second here to check how we're doing. Awesome. Okay, so how can I memorize the polyatomic ions, and is there an acronym? As this answer says, unfortunately, there isn't any in terms of acronyms that I at least know of to memorize them. But the one thing I would say is that, as this question says, it's really down to just practicing. The good news is, though, is that when it comes to polyatomic ions, there are those that occur frequently, and the ones I can think of are nitrates, so NO3, sulfate, SO4, phosphate, PO4, and nitrate, sulfate, and probably carbonate, CO3. Okay, so those are the most common ones. And in regards to their charge, nitrate is minus, sulfur is 2 minus, phosphate is 3 minus, and carbonate is also 2 minus. These ones are the ones that occur very frequently, so by memorizing these, it would help you a lot to navigate the other ones. Typically, you can tell by the first part of their name. That's going to be what the main, I guess, non-metal is going to be, where the oxygen surrounded it. So nitrate, for example, it's nitrogen. Okay. Sulfate, same thing here. It's sulfur. Phosphate, phosphorus, and carbonate, carbon. So that is, I like to start here, because memorizing these polyatomic ions and working with them helps you memorize a lot of the ones that they're based off of later on. So for example, like you'll hear things like nitrite, which is just going to be the nitrates, but you subtract 1 oxygen. Same charge and everything. So nitrite will be NO2 minus. Nitrite. And you notice that anything that ends with ite, if you can remember the base form, the 8, you just subtract an oxygen but keep everything else the same. So then sulfite will be SO3 minus. Phosphite will be PO3 minus. Well, SO3 2 minus. PO3 3 minus. And carbonite, which is a thing, is CO2 2 minus. Just take note that exactly all I did was take away an oxygen, and bam, I have all the ites. Okay. The trick here is that because I'm familiar with these, it helped me break it down further into the other forms it can take. In regards to other polyatomic ions, I do have a list here, I believe. Let's see. That will help us just be able to familiarize ourselves with them. Polyatomic ions. There we go. We have things like, another one that I do see commonly is chromate and dichromate. Usually when you're doing like some color testing, I do see these ones pop up. And you can see here, even with chlorate, you can see chlorite right under it, because it follows the same rule of when you take away an oxygen, it's still the same charge and everything else. It's just going to be 1 less oxygen. There are other polyatomic ions that you should be familiar with. The ones that do appear very frequently, especially when you're working with acids and bases, are ammonium, which is NH4+. This one just appears frequently. I'm only really listing these because I'm trying to emphasize the ones that you should be really familiar with, because they occur frequently, especially when you're dealing with acids and bases question. And the other one, I would say exactly the same thing with dealing with acids and bases. We have hydroxide, OH minus. Okay, this one is quite common in regards to how it shows up, especially when dealing with bases. And the last one that I do see quite a bit of, especially when just working through like some questions, I see cyanide. It's easy to, I guess, forget, just because it is the one that's very distinct in terms of naming from the rest of them, because I don't think you'd be able to get carbon and nitrogen from cyanide, but that's what cyanide is. So in order to memorize the polyatomic ions, I can't think of an acronym, but I would say start with these 4. Okay, nitrate, sulfate, phosphate, carbonate, and also familiarize yourself with these three. Cyanide, because it's really different from the rest. Ammonium, hopefully you'll be familiar with ammonia, because those NH3 and NH4 plus do occur quite frequently. And hydroxide, that one you will see it almost often in your acids and bases questions, specifically bases, because they usually work with hydroxides. Okay, so that's the best way I can break down in regards to how you can memorize the polyatomic ions. Unfortunately, there is no shorthand way in terms of just learning an acronym to get familiar with them. It just boils down more so to practice and familiarizing yourselves with them. But I will say that once you familiarize yourself with these four up here, getting the ites and understanding what they mean in regards to phosphite, nitrite, carbonite, all these other things, it'd be easier to navigate once you understand the root of where it came from. Okay. Now move on to question number 3.